I was standing in my driveway staring at an empty space where my boat trailer should have been, when I realized the HOA had finally gone too far. My name is Jack Callahan, and I had lived in the Sunset Ridge community in Jacksonville, Florida for 3 years. It was one of those neighborhoods where everything looked perfect from the outside, but harbored enough petty drama to fuel a reality TV show. The houses were cookie-cutter Mediterranean style with terracotta roofs, manicured lawns, and just enough personality to distinguish one from another without actually standing out. I had bought the place after my divorce because it was close to my job as a marine technician at the naval station, and the proximity to the water meant I could take my boat out on weekends. That morning started like any other Tuesday. I woke up at 5:30, made coffee, and got ready for work. My 22-foot Grady White sat on its trailer in my driveway where it had been parked for the past 2 years. The trailer was fully registered, the boat was properly maintained, and everything was completely legal. I had specifically checked the HOA rules before buying the house, and while they had restrictions about parking commercial vehicles and RVs, there was nothing explicitly prohibiting boat trailers in driveways. But when I walked outside with my travel mug at 6:15, the entire rig was gone. At first, I thought maybe I was losing my mind. I stood there in my work boots and cargo pants, coffee in hand, staring at the oil stain on the concrete that marked where the trailer had been. My truck was still there, my neighbors' cars were in their driveways, but my boat and trailer had vanished into thin air. I pulled out my phone and called the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office non-emergency line. The dispatcher who answered sounded bored until I mentioned the boat. "Sir, do you have any security cameras?" she asked. "No, but my neighbor might. This is a boat and trailer we're talking about. That's at least $40,000 worth of equipment. Have you checked with your HOA? Sometimes they arrange towing for violations." I felt my jaw tighten. "I don't have any violations. The boat has been there for 2 years. "I understand, sir, but I'd recommend checking with them first. We'll send an officer out to take a report, but if it was a civil towing matter, that's going to be handled differently than if it was stolen." An officer arrived about 40 minutes later. His name was Deputy Martinez, and he was professional but clearly thought this was going to be a waste of time. He took photos of the empty driveway, wrote down my information, and asked me the standard questions about when I last saw the boat and whether I had given anyone permission to take it. "No one had permission," I said firmly. "I'm the only person with keys to the trailer lock. Someone would have had to cut it or pick it." Deputy Martinez walked around the area where the trailer had been. "No cut lock pieces here. You checked with your HOA?" "Not yet. I called you first because this is theft." He nodded slowly. "I get it, but you need to understand that if the HOA hired a towing company and there's some dispute about parking rules, that's a civil matter. We can't arrest someone for enforcing HOA rules, even if you disagree with how they did it. They took something worth $40,000 from my private property without my permission. How is that not theft? Because if they can show they had authority under your HOA agreement, it's not theft. It's a dispute." He handed me a card. "Here's your case number. Check with your HOA, find out if they towed it. If they did, you'll need to work it out with them or get a lawyer. If they didn't, call me back and we'll investigate it as a theft." After he left, I stood in my driveway feeling that special combination of anger and helplessness that comes from being told your problem isn't actually a problem. I went back inside and pulled out the thick folder of HOA documents I had received when I bought the house. The covenants and restrictions were 70 pages of dense legal text that mostly concerned paint colors, lawn maintenance, and architectural modifications. I found the section on parking and read it 3 times. Recreational vehicles, commercial vehicles, trucks over 3/4-ton capacity, and trailers were not to be parked on streets overnight. Driveways were acceptable for vehicles registered to residents. There was a clause about maintaining community aesthetics, but nothing that explicitly banned boat trailers from driveways. I looked up the HOA management company information and found the president's name, Patricia Donovan. Of course, it was a Patricia. I had met her exactly once, at a community meeting about pool hours, where she had spent 20 minutes complaining about teenagers being too loud. She was in her late 50s with that specific haircut that said she wanted to speak to managers on a regular basis. And she had a way of smiling while saying cutting things that made you want to check your wallet afterward. I called the HOA management office and got a receptionist who sounded like she was having an even worse day than I was. Sunset Ridge HOA, this is Donna. Hi Donna, this is Jack Callahan from 847 Pelican Way. My boat trailer was towed from my driveway sometime last night, and I need to know if the HOA authorized this. There was a pause and the sound of typing. Let me check the violations log. Callahan, you said? Yes. 847 Pelican Way. More typing. Okay, I see here that you received a violation notice 2 weeks ago regarding unauthorized recreational vehicle storage. I never received any notice. It says here it was mailed certified on November 3rd. I pulled up my calendar. November 3rd was 2 weeks ago exactly. I never got certified mail. I would have had to sign for it. Well, sir, that's what our records show. The notice gave you 14 days to remove the violation or face towing at owner expense. Where's my boat now? It would be at Mason's Towing and Impound on Beach Boulevard. You'll need to contact them directly for release. There's a fine of $500 to the HOA for the violation, plus whatever the towing company charges. I felt heat rising up my neck. I didn't violate anything. Boat trailers aren't banned in the CC and Arctic S. Sir, the HOA board has the authority to enforce community standards. If you want to dispute this, you can request a hearing with the board. The next meeting is December 15th. That's 3 weeks away. You expect me to pay storage fees for 3 weeks while waiting for a hearing about a rule that doesn't exist. I'm just the receptionist, sir. I don't make the policies. I forced myself to take a breath. Can I have Patricia Donovan's contact information? I can't give out board members' personal information. You can email the board at board@sunsetridge.com and someone will respond within 5 business days. 5 business days. You people stole my boat and I have to wait a week to even talk to someone about it. Sir, if you continue using that tone, I'm going to end this call. The HOA didn't steal anything. We enforced a community violation. You have the information you need to retrieve your property. She hung up. I stood there looking at my phone, trying to decide if throwing it would make me feel better. Probably not, and I needed it. Instead, I grabbed my truck keys and headed to Mason's Towing and Impound. The towing company was exactly what you'd expect. A chain-link fence topped with barbed wire, a prefab office building that had seen better decades, and rows of impounded vehicles slowly baking in the Florida sun. I parked in the dirt lot and walked into the office where a woman with bleached blonde hair and too much eyeliner sat behind bulletproof glass. "Help you?" she asked without looking up from her phone. "You towed my boat from 847 Pelican Way in Sunset Ridge. I need to get it back." She sighed like I had just asked her to climb Mount Everest and started typing on a computer that looked like it was from the early 2000s. Name, Jack Callahan. Uh-huh. Okay, so that was towed last night at 11:45 p.m. Towing fee is $4.50, storage is $60 per day, and there's a $200 administrative fee. Wait, you're charging me storage for less than 24 hours. Any partial day is billed as a full day. Plus you got the HOA fine, but you pay that to them, not us. So you want $710 to give me back my own property that was taken without my permission? Look, buddy, we're just the towing company. HOA called us, we towed it. You want it back, that's the fee, cash or card. I don't have $700 in cash right now. I'll need to go to the bank. Adam's right there. She pointed to a machine in the corner that definitely charged extra fees. Can I at least see the boat? Make sure it wasn't damaged. She rolled her eyes but pressed a button that buzzed the door open. Go ahead. It's in the back lot, row C. I walked through the impound yard, passing cars with smashed windows, trucks with expired tags, and a school bus that looked like it had been there since the Reagan administration. My boat was in row C, sitting there like it had just been abandoned. I walked around it checking for damage. There were some new scratches on the trailer fender, and one of my dock lines had come loose, but otherwise it looked okay. The rage I had been suppressing all morning suddenly felt very clear and focused. This wasn't about HOA rules or community aesthetics. This was about a petty tyrant using a position of minor authority to harass people. Patricia Donovan wanted to flex her power, and I had somehow become her target. I went back to the office, withdrew $800 from the predatory ATM, and paid the woman behind the glass. She gave me a receipt and a release form, and I hooked my boat back up to my truck. The whole process took another 45 minutes because apparently nothing at Mason's Towing could happen quickly. By the time I got back to my house, it was almost noon. I had missed half a day of work, spent $700 I hadn't budgeted for, and I still had my boat back in the same driveway it had been towed from. I parked it in the exact same spot and took a photo. Then I went inside and started making calls. The first call was to a lawyer I had used during my divorce. His name was Steve, and he specialized in family law, but I figured he might know someone who handled HOA disputes. Jack, good to hear from you. What's going on? I explained the situation. He listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. Okay, so here's the thing, Steve said when I finished. HOA law in Florida is complicated. They have pretty broad authority to enforce rules, even rules that aren't explicitly written in the CC and Articles. If they can argue that boat trailers fall under the umbrella of maintaining community standards, they might have a case. But I never got the violation notice. They'll say they sent it. Proving they didn't is going to be almost impossible. And even if you could prove it, you'd spend thousands in legal fees fighting a $700 penalty. It's not worth it. So I'm just supposed to let them steal my stuff. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you need to pick your battles. Go to the board meeting, make your case, see if you can get them to back down. If they don't, you can decide whether to escalate. But Jack, honestly, you might want to consider just keeping the boat somewhere else. Storage units aren't that expensive. It's my property. I should be able to park my boat in my own driveway. Should and can are two different things. I'll send you some names of attorneys who handle HOA stuff if you want a consultation, but I'm telling you as a friend, this is a fight that's going to cost you more than it's worth. After I hung up with Steve, I sat at my kitchen table feeling defeated. The reasonable part of my brain knew he was probably right. The stubborn part didn't care. I had been pushed around enough in my life, and I was tired of being told to just accept it when someone with a little bit of authority decided to make my life difficult. I spent the next hour researching HOA law in Florida. Steve was right that it was complicated, but I found something interesting. While HOAs had broad enforcement power, they were still required to follow their own procedures. If the CC and Articus said violations had to be noticed in writing with 14 days to cure, then they had to actually provide that notice. If they couldn't prove they had sent it, the towing might be invalid. I also found several cases where homeowners had successfully sued HOAs for overreach. It wasn't common, but it happened. The key seemed to be documenting everything and showing a pattern of harassment or violation of proper procedures. I started a folder. I put in the receipt from the towing company, photos of my boat in the driveway, a copy of the CC and Articus with the parking section highlighted, and a timeline of events. Then I sent a certified letter to the HOA board requesting a copy of the violation notice they claimed to have sent me, along with proof of mailing. 2 days later, I got a response. Not by certified mail, but by a letter tucked into my door. It was from Patricia Donovan personally. "Dear Mr. Callahan," it read, "your continued violation of community standards is unacceptable. The boat trailer must be removed from your property within 24 hours, or it will be towed again. Additionally, you now owe the HOA $500 for the initial violation plus $100 per day for continued non-compliance. Your current balance is $700. Please remit payment immediately. Patricia Donovan, HOA President." I read the letter 3 times, each time getting angrier. There was no copy of any original violation notice, no proof of mailing, just more demands and more threats. And now she was trying to charge me $100 a day. That evening I did something I probably should have done earlier. I knocked on my neighbor's door. His name was Marcus, and we had a friendly nodding relationship, but had never really talked beyond complaints about lawn service schedules. Marcus answered in a Florida State t-shirt and shorts, holding a beer. "Hey Jack, what's up? Do you have a minute? I wanted to ask about the HOA." His expression changed immediately. "Oh man, what did Patricia do now? So I'm not the only one. Dude, come in. You need to hear some stories." Marcus's house had the same layout as mine but felt more lived in, with family photos on the walls and kids' toys scattered around. His wife, Denise, was in the kitchen making dinner. She waved when she saw me. "Jack's having HOA problems," Marcus announced. "Oh no," Denise said. "Let me guess. Patricia, over the next hour they told me everything." Patricia Donovan had become HOA president 3 years ago after the previous president moved away. Before that, the HOA had been pretty hands-off. As long as you kept your lawn maintained and didn't paint your house neon green, nobody bothered you. But Patricia ran for president on a platform of restoring community standards and had immediately started finding violations everywhere. She had fined people for having the wrong color mailbox. She had tried to ban vegetable gardens in front yards. She had sent violation notices for grass being a 1/4 inch too tall. Most people paid the fines because fighting wasn't worth the hassle, which just encouraged her to keep going. "Last year she tried to fine me for parking my work truck in my driveway," Marcus said. He was a plumber and had a truck with his company logo on it. Said it was a commercial vehicle. I had to get a lawyer to send her a letter explaining that my personal truck having a business magnet on it didn't make it commercial. She backed off, but only because I spent $300 on the lawyer. "Has anyone tried to vote her out?" I asked. "You need 20% of homeowners to petition for a special election," Denise explained. "There are 98 houses in Sunset Ridge, so that's 20 households. We tried to organize it last year and got 14 signatures before people got scared." "Scared of what?" "Patricia has friends on the Architectural Review Board and the County Code Enforcement. People who opposed her started getting surprise inspections for permits, property line disputes, all kinds of stuff. It felt coordinated. Nobody could prove it, but after a few people got hit with county fines, everyone else backed off. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. That's insane. Yeah, well, welcome to HOA living, Marcus said. My advice: don't park your boat in the driveway. It sucks, but it's not worth the fight. I went home that night more determined than ever. If Patricia Donovan thought she could run a protection racket in a suburban neighborhood, she had picked the wrong person to mess with. I had dealt with plenty of petty tyrants in the Navy before going civilian, and I knew the type. The only thing bullies understood was someone who wouldn't back down. The next morning, I moved my boat trailer back into my driveway and set up a security camera pointed right at it. If they were going to tow it again, I was going to have video evidence. Then I started making phone calls. The first call was to the Coast Guard station where I had friends from my days working on naval vessels. I asked for Lieutenant Commander Harris O'Brien, who I had known for almost 10 years. "Jack Callahan, as I live and breathe," Harris said when she got on the line. "What can I do for you?" "I need some advice about something weird that happened. My HOA towed my boat and I'm trying to figure out if they had the right to do that." "Wait, they towed your boat? From where?" "My driveway, on my property." There was a pause. "Was the boat registered?" "Of course. Everything's current, documented, inspected. I'm not an idiot. And they just took it without your permission." "Yep. Towed it at midnight, charged me $700 to get it back, and now they're threatening to do it again." Harris was quiet for a moment. "Jack, that might actually be a federal issue. If they removed maritime property without authorization from the registered owner, that could fall under maritime theft laws, especially if it crossed state lines or navigable waters. It just went to an impound lot on Beach Boulevard." "Doesn't matter. The boat itself is federally documented property. If someone took it without your consent, that's theft of maritime property. That's our jurisdiction." I felt a spark of hope. "Seriously, let me make some calls." "Don't move the boat. Don't do anything that could be seen as escalating. Just document everything. I'll get back to you." She called me back that afternoon. "Okay, this is interesting. I talked to our legal office and they agree this could potentially fall under federal jurisdiction. The problem is we need to establish clear theft rather than a civil dispute. Can you prove you didn't give permission?" "I have security footage now showing the boat in my driveway. I have the police report from when I reported it stolen. I have receipts from the impound lot." "Good. Here's what I need you to do. File a formal complaint with the Coast Guard Investigative Service. I'll send you the contact information. Explain everything that happened, provide all your documentation. They'll open an investigation." "Will that actually accomplish anything?" "If they determine that your HOA removed federally registered maritime property without authorization and demanded payment for its return, that's extortion and theft. Those are felonies. The federal government takes maritime law very seriously." I spent that evening writing out a detailed complaint. I included every document I had, every receipt, every photo. I described the HOA's threats, the lack of proper notice, Patricia Donovan's letter demanding increasing payments. I submitted it through the Coast Guard's online portal and got a confirmation number. 3 days later, I got a call from a special agent named Rodriguez with the Coast Guard Investigative Service. "Mr. Callahan, I've reviewed your complaint. I have some questions." We talked for almost an hour. He asked about the timeline, the HOA's justification, whether I had given any form of permission. He wanted copies of my registration documents, proof of ownership, the full text of the HOA rules. I sent him everything. "Okay," he said finally. "Based on what you've provided, I think we have grounds for an investigation. I'm going to need to interview the HOA president and the towing company. I'm also going to need you to be available to provide a formal statement. Whatever you need. One more thing. If they tow your boat again, do not pay to get it back. Call me immediately. If this goes where I think it's going, we'll need to preserve the chain of evidence. 2 days after that conversation, my security camera caught something interesting. At 8 p.m., a white Toyota Camry pulled up in front of my house and idled there for about 5 minutes. I couldn't see the driver clearly, but when the car left, I found another letter tucked in my door. This one was less polite. Final warning, it read. Remove boat trailer immediately or face legal action. You now owe $1,400 in fines. Payment must be received by November 30th, or a lien will be placed on your property. Patricia Donovan, HOA President. I scanned the letter and emailed it to Agent Rodriguez. He called me back within an hour. Okay, that's escalation. She's now threatening to place a lien on your property for alleged fines that haven't gone through any proper dispute process. That's potentially fraudulent lien filing. I'm going to move this investigation forward. Can you come to the office tomorrow to give a formal statement? The Coast Guard Investigative Service Office was in a nondescript building near the port. Agent Rodriguez turned out to be a serious guy in his 40s with the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that came from years of dealing with actual criminals. He had me go through the entire story again while recording it, then had me sign a formal statement. Here's where we are, he said after we finished. Your boat is federally documented property. Under maritime law, unauthorized removal of that property is theft. The fact that they then demanded payment for its return moves it into extortion territory. Your HOA president doesn't appear to understand that she can't just take people's boats because she doesn't like where they're parked. So what happens now? Now I interview Patricia Donovan and the towing company. Depending on what they say, this either gets resolved quickly or it becomes a federal case. Either way, you're protected. If they tow your boat again, they'll be doing it knowing there's an active federal investigation. That would be phenomenally stupid. You don't know Patricia. He almost smiled. I've dealt with worse. Let me handle this. I left feeling better than I had in weeks. For the first time since this started, I felt like someone was actually taking it seriously instead of telling me it was just a civil dispute I needed to work out. The next evening, Marcus came over looking worried. Dude, I heard Patricia is planning to have your boat towed again this weekend. She's been telling people you're defying the board and she's going to make an example out of you. Let her try. I've got the Coast Guard investigating her. His eyes went wide. What? I explained everything. When I finished, Marcus was grinning. Oh man, she has no idea what she's walking into. This is going to be beautiful. I'm not trying to destroy her. I just want her to leave my boat alone. Jack, she's been terrorizing this neighborhood for 3 years. If you can actually stop her, you'll be a hero. That Friday night, I sat in my living room watching the security camera feed on my laptop. Sure enough, at 11:30 p.m., a flatbed tow truck pulled up in front of my house. I immediately called Agent Rodriguez. They're here, I said. Tow truck just arrived. Do not confront them. Just record everything and let them take it. I'll meet you at the Impound lot in the morning. I watched through the window as 2 guys got out of the truck and started hooking up my boat trailer. Part of me wanted to run out there and stop them, but I knew that would just complicate things. Instead, I recorded video on my phone and watched them drive away with my boat for the second time. I barely slept that night. At 7 a.m. I was back at Mason's Towing and Impound. Agent Rodriguez was already there in an unmarked car, along with 2 Jacksonville Sheriff's deputies and another person in a Coast Guard uniform. That's your boat?" Rodriguez asked, pointing to where my rig was already parked in the impound lot. "Yes." "Good. Stay here." I watched as the group walked into the office. Through the window I could see the blonde woman behind the counter go from bored to alarmed very quickly. The conversation lasted about 15 minutes, then Rodriguez came back out. "Okay, here's what's happening. The towing company is cooperating. They've confirmed that Patricia Donovan called them at 11 p.m. last night and ordered the tow. They have records of her previous call as well. They're releasing your boat to you at no charge and providing us with all their documentation. Just like that. They're a legitimate business who didn't know they were participating in what amounts to theft of federal property. They're cooperating to avoid charges. Your boat has been illegally impounded twice. That's 2 counts of theft and 2 counts of extortion. We're going to have a conversation with Miss Donovan. Can I be there?" "No, but I'll call you later. Getting my boat back took 20 minutes this time." The woman behind the counter wouldn't make eye contact with me as she processed the release. I hooked it up and drove home, then spent the rest of the day trying to focus on anything other than wondering what was happening with Patricia. Rodriguez called me at 4 p.m. "We just finished interviewing Patricia Donovan. It did not go well for her." "What happened?" She insisted she had authority under HOA rules to remove violations. When I explained that boats are federally documented property and maritime law supersedes HOA rules, she told me I didn't know what I was talking about. When I explained that demanding payment for return of property constitutes extortion, she said you should have just followed the rules. She's either incredibly ignorant or incredibly arrogant. Probably both. We're recommending federal charges for theft of maritime property and extortion. The U.S. Attorney's Office will make the final decision, but based on her statements and the documentation, I think they'll prosecute. She also admitted to threatening to place a fraudulent lien on your property, which is another felony. I felt a weird mix of vindication and disbelief. She's really going to be charged with federal crimes over a boat trailer. She really committed federal crimes over a boat trailer. Actions have consequences. The fact that she doesn't think she did anything wrong actually makes it worse. She showed no remorse, no understanding that she violated your rights. People like that need to be stopped. The next few weeks were surreal. Patricia Donovan was formally indicted on 2 counts of theft of maritime property, 2 counts of extortion, and 1 count of attempted fraudulent lien filing. All federal charges. The story made the local news and then went viral on social media. HOA president faces federal charges for towing boat was apparently exactly the kind of story the internet loved. Patricia hired a lawyer who immediately tried to get the charges dismissed, arguing that this was a civil HOA dispute. The U.S. Attorney's Office filed a motion explaining in great detail why maritime law meant it absolutely was not a civil dispute, and the judge agreed. The case was going forward. Meanwhile, things in Sunset Ridge changed quickly. Once people realized Patricia was actually being prosecuted, the dam broke. Suddenly, everyone was willing to talk about her behavior. People came forward with stories of harassment, improper fines, and threats. The HOA board held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to remove Patricia as president. They also voted to refund every fine she had issued in the past 2 years and to restrict the board's authority to only what was explicitly written in the CC and Articles. Marcus came over one evening with a 6-pack to celebrate. "Dude, you actually did it. You took down the neighborhood tyrant. I just wanted to park my boat in my driveway." "Yeah, but you didn't back down. Everyone else just paid the fines or moved their stuff. You fought back, and now the whole neighborhood is better for it." We sat on my back porch drinking beer and watching the sunset. My boat was in the driveway where it belonged, and for the first time in months, I wasn't worried about some petty bureaucrat making my life difficult. The legal process took time. Patricia's lawyer tried every tactic to get the charges reduced or dismissed. He argued she didn't understand maritime law. He argued there was no intent to commit theft. He argued she was just trying to enforce community standards. None of it worked. The evidence was overwhelming. The towing company had provided records of her calls. I had documentation showing I never received proper notice. The security camera footage showed the trucks arriving at suspicious hours. Most damning was Patricia's own statement to Agent Rodriguez, where she essentially admitted to everything while insisting she had the right to do it. In March, 6 months after my boat was first towed, Patricia Donovan pleaded guilty to 2 counts of theft and 2 counts of extortion in exchange for the lien charge being dropped. She was sentenced to 2 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, and ordered to pay restitution of $1,400 to cover my towing fees and associated costs. She was also permanently banned from serving on any HOA board in Florida. The day the sentence was announced, I got calls from 3 different news outlets wanting interviews. I declined most of them, but did talk to one reporter from the local paper who had been covering the story. "Mr. Callahan, you feel vindicated?" she asked. "I feel like justice was served. Nobody should be able to take your property and demand money for its return just because they don't like where you parked it. I'm glad the system worked, even though it took longer than it should have. What would you say to other homeowners dealing with abusive HOAs? Document everything. Know your rights. Don't assume that just because someone has authority they can do whatever they want. And if what they're doing is actually illegal, don't be afraid to get law enforcement involved, even if people tell you it's just a civil matter." The article ran with the headline, "Homeowners Stand Against HOA Leads to Federal Conviction." It got shared thousands of times on social media. I started getting emails from people all over the country dealing with similar situations, asking for advice. I wasn't an expert, but I tried to help where I could. The Sunset Ridge HOA underwent a complete transformation. The new president was a retired teacher named Bob who ran on a platform of "let's just maintain the common areas and leave people alone." The board revised all the rules to be clear and specific, with proper notice requirements and appeal processes. The atmosphere in the neighborhood changed from tense to relaxed. People actually started talking to each other again, instead of worrying about being reported for violations. I kept my boat in my driveway and took it out on the water whenever I had time. Every time I hooked it up to my truck, I felt a little surge of satisfaction knowing that I had stood up for my rights and won. One Saturday afternoon, a few months after Patricia's sentencing, I was washing my boat when a car pulled up. A woman in her 30s got out, looking nervous. "Are you Jack Callahan?" she asked. "That's me." "I'm sorry to bother you. My name is Amanda. I live in a neighborhood in Tampa, and our HOA is doing similar things to what yours was doing. I read about your case online. I was hoping you could give me some advice." I put down my sponge. "What's happening?" She explained that her HOA was fining people for minor infractions and threatening to foreclose on homes if fines weren't paid. The amounts were getting ridiculous. Thousands of dollars for things like slightly overgrown bushes or mailboxes that were the wrong shade of black. "Have they taken anyone's property?" I asked. "Not yet, but they're threatening to. They say they have the right to remove violations from properties." "Okay, first thing, get a copy of your CC and Articus and read them carefully. Know exactly what they can and can't do. Second, document everything. Every letter, every fine, every threat. Third, don't pay fines for things that aren't actually violations. And fourth, if they do take property, especially vehicles, call law enforcement immediately and file a theft report. Don't let anyone tell you it's just a civil matter. What if the police won't take it seriously? Then go higher. State attorney, FBI if it involves fraud or extortion, Coast Guard if it's a boat or maritime property. There are authorities who will care, you just have to find the right ones. Amanda thanked me and left with a determined expression. I hoped her situation worked out, but I knew not everyone would have the resources or stubborn streak to fight the way I had. That evening I took my boat out for a sunset cruise. The water was calm, the sky was turning orange and pink, and I felt more at peace than I had in a long time. The whole experience with Patricia and the HOA had been exhausting and frustrating, but it had also reminded me that standing up for yourself mattered. That you didn't have to accept abuse just because someone claimed authority. As I cruised past the Jacksonville shoreline, I thought about all the people in HOA neighborhoods across the country dealing with petty tyrants who made their lives miserable over nonsense rules. Some of them would fight back and win. Some would move away. Some would just endure it. But maybe, just maybe, a few more Patricia Donovans would think twice before abusing their power after hearing what happened to this one. I docked my boat as the last light faded from the sky, loaded it back onto the trailer, and drove home. My driveway was waiting, same as always. I parked the boat, locked the trailer, and went inside. The next morning I woke up to an email from Agent Rodriguez. Wanted to give you an update, it read. Patricia Donovan's case has become a teaching example at federal law enforcement training. Your documentation and willingness to pursue the matter properly made this an easy prosecution. Thank you for your cooperation, and enjoy your boat. I smiled and hit reply. Thank you for taking it seriously when everyone else said it was just a civil dispute. Made all the difference. At work that week, people kept asking me about the HOA case. It had become local legend, the guy who got his HOA president federally prosecuted. I didn't mind the attention, but I also didn't seek it out. I had just wanted to live my life and park my boat in peace. The following weekend, Marcus invited me to a neighborhood barbecue at the community pool. This was another change from the Patricia era, when any gathering had to be approved by the board in advance. Now people just organized things and invited whoever wanted to come. About 40 people showed up. There was music, burgers, kids running around, the whole suburban summer scene. Several people came up to thank me for standing up to Patricia. One older gentleman named Frank, who lived 3 streets over, pulled me aside. I want to tell you something, he said. Patricia fined me $2,000 3 years ago for having a vegetable garden in my front yard. Said it violated aesthetic standards. I couldn't afford to fight it, so I paid it and ripped out the garden. Lost vegetables I'd been growing for years, family heirloom tomatoes and everything. After she got sentenced, the HOA refunded my money. Last week I replanted that garden. My tomatoes are coming back. He had tears in his eyes. It hit me then that this had never just been about my boat. Patricia had hurt a lot of people, and most of them hadn't been able to do anything about it. The fact that she finally faced consequences meant something to all of them. I'm glad you got your garden back, I said. Me too. And I'm glad there are still people willing to fight when something's not right. The summer passed peacefully. No HOA drama, no threatening letters, just life in a suburban neighborhood the way it was supposed to be. I took my boat out regularly, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends. I even took Marcus and his family out a few times. His kids loved it. In August, I got a letter from the U.S. Attorney's Office informing me that Patricia Donovan had completed her community service and was in compliance with her probation. The case was considered closed. I filed the letter away in my folder of HOA documents, a reminder of the whole saga. That fall, a news crew from a national morning show reached out. They were doing a segment on HOA abuse and wanted to interview me. I almost said no, but then I thought about Amanda from Tampa and all the other people who had emailed me asking for help. If sharing my story could help someone else stand up for their rights, it was worth doing. The interview aired in October. It was only about 6 minutes after editing, but they covered the basic story and emphasized the lessons about documenting everything and knowing your rights. After it aired, I got even more emails from people dealing with HOA problems. I tried to respond to as many as I could, always with the same basic advice. Know your CC and articles, document everything, don't be afraid to escalate to proper authorities. Some people pushed back, saying I was encouraging others to be difficult or that HOAs served an important function in maintaining property values. I didn't disagree that HOAs could serve a purpose, but I maintained that they had to follow their own rules and respect homeowners' rights. The fact that Patricia had been federally prosecuted proved that there were limits to HOA authority. By the time the first anniversary of the initial towing rolled around in November, life had returned to normal. My boat sat in my driveway, properly registered and maintained. The HOA left me alone. The neighborhood was peaceful. It felt like the whole thing had been a bad dream, except for the folder of documents and news clippings that proved it really happened. I took my boat out that weekend to mark the anniversary. The weather was perfect, mid-70s with clear skies. As I cruised along the coast, I thought about everything that had happened. If someone had told me a year ago that an HOA dispute would lead to federal charges, Coast Guard involvement, and national news coverage, I would have laughed at them. But that's exactly what happened, all because I refused to be bullied by someone who thought a position of minor authority gave them unlimited power. The most important lesson I learned was that you can't always avoid conflict with unreasonable people, but you can choose how you respond to it. I could have moved my boat to a storage facility and paid Patricia's fines and made my life easier in the short term. But that would have meant accepting that she could abuse her position without consequences. By standing my ground and pursuing proper legal channels, I not only protected my own rights but helped protect everyone else in the neighborhood too. As I headed back to the dock, I saw another boat pulling out, a nice center console with a family aboard. The father waved at me and I waved back. Just people enjoying their boats, living their lives, not worrying about petty tyrants with clipboards making up rules. That's how it should be. I loaded my boat back onto the trailer and drove home through familiar streets. Kids were playing in yards, people were walking dogs, someone was mowing their lawn. Normal suburban life. The HOA signs at the neighborhood entrance looked less ominous now, just markers for a residential community instead of warnings about an oppressive regime. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed Marcus was outside with his kids. They ran over as I was unhooking my boat. "Mr. Callahan, did you catch any fish?" His youngest daughter asked. "Didn't go fishing today, just cruising around. But next time I go fishing, you want to come along." Her eyes lit up. "Can I, Dad?" Marcus grinned. "If Jack's offering, absolutely. Fair warning, though, she'll talk your ear off." "I can handle it," I said. That evening I sat on my back porch with a beer, watching the sun go down. My phone buzzed with another email from someone asking advice about their HOA situation. I'd answer it tomorrow. Tonight, I just wanted to appreciate the peace that came from knowing I had fought for something that mattered and won. The legal system had worked the way it was supposed to. An abuse of power had been checked. A neighborhood had been freed from a tyrant, and I could park my boat in my driveway without worrying about midnight towing operations. It wasn't saving the world, but it was something real and meaningful. As darkness fell, I went inside and pulled out the folder one more time. I looked at the first police report, the violation letter from Patricia, the receipts from the towing company, all the documentation that had seemed overwhelming at the time. Then I looked at the final letter from the U.S. Attorney's Office confirming the case was closed. Beginning to end, the whole story in paper form. I closed the folder and put it back in the filing cabinet. It was over. Patricia Donovan would spend 2 years on probation and the rest of her life banned from HOA boards. The Sunset Ridge community was recovering. Other people dealing with similar situations had a roadmap for how to fight back, and I had my boat in my driveway where it belonged. Sometimes justice took time, but when it finally arrived, it was worth the wait. The next year passed quietly. I continued working at the naval station, taking my boat out regularly, living my life without HOA drama. Marcus's daughter went fishing with me twice and proved she could indeed talk for hours straight, mostly about school and her friends and whatever YouTube videos were popular with 8-year-olds. It was exhausting and kind of wonderful. The new HOA board operated smoothly and professionally. They maintained the common areas, handled legitimate violations like actual safety hazards, and left people alone about personal choices that didn't affect anyone else. Property values stayed stable. The neighborhood stayed nice. It turned out you could have community standards without being tyrannical about enforcement. I still got occasional emails from people dealing with HOA problems. Some of them successfully fought back and won. Some of them lost. Some decided it wasn't worth the fight and just moved. I understood all of those choices. Not everyone had the resources or energy or personality to fight the way I had. Sometimes picking your battles meant walking away. But every email I got thanking me for sharing my story reminded me why it had been important to stand my ground. Somewhere out there, people were standing up to petty tyrants because they knew it was possible to win. That mattered. One thing I made sure to do was to thank Lieutenant Commander Harris O'Brien properly. I took her and her husband out for dinner at a nice steakhouse in downtown Jacksonville. We talked about old times working on naval vessels and new times dealing with ridiculous situations like HOA disputes that somehow became federal cases. "You know what the funny thing is," Harris said. "Maritime law is usually about shipping disputes or smuggling or major criminal activity. This might be the first time in history someone used it to fight an HOA over a boat trailer in a driveway." "Glad I could make legal history," I said with a laugh. "No, seriously, you should be proud. You found the right law for your situation and you pursued it properly. A lot of people would have just given up or gotten aggressive and made it worse. You did it the right way." As I drove home that night, I thought about how random life could be. If Patricia Donovan had just left my boat alone, none of this would have happened. She could have focused her energy on actual problems instead of manufactured violations. She could have been a reasonable HOA president who maintained standards without harassing residents. Instead, she chose to be a tyrant, and that choice had consequences. Sometimes the arc of justice was long and sometimes it was surprisingly swift, but it always bent toward accountability eventually. Patricia had learned that lesson the hard way. I hoped other petty tyrants in HOA boards across the country were paying attention. My boat sat in my driveway under the stars, right where it belonged. Tomorrow I'd probably take it out again. The weather was supposed to be beautiful, and the fish were supposedly biting near the jetties. But tonight I was just content to be home, living my life on my terms, free from harassment by people who thought a title meant they could do whatever they want. The whole experience had taught me something valuable about standing up for your rights, about documentation and persistence, about finding the right authorities when local ones wouldn't help. Those were lessons I'd carry forward into whatever challenges came next. But mostly it had taught me that sometimes you just had to refuse to be pushed around, even when everyone was telling you to let it go. Because if you didn't stand up for yourself, nobody else would. And if you did stand up, you might be surprised how many people were waiting for someone to lead the way. I went to bed that night feeling grateful for the outcome, for the friends who supported me, for the professionals like Agent Rodriguez and Harris who took the situation seriously when they could have dismissed it. And yes, even grateful for Patricia Donovan in a weird way, because she had inadvertently taught me that I was stronger and more capable than I thought I was. The boat trailer stayed in my driveway, and that was the end of the story. No more drama, no more late-night towing operations, no more threatening letters. Just a man and his boat and a driveway where he was free to park it. Simple as that.